Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today I'm doing a bit of a project that I've sort of done for the last couple of years. And that has been sort of born out of when the Booker shortlists come out. I often realise that there are authors who I've either been meaning to read for a long time or have these really impressive back catalogues of writing that I've never read anything of. So often I'll then use that as a bit of a springboard to read other books by the authors shortlisted for the Booker Prize that year. That's a really long-winded way of saying it, but essentially what that looks like is just finding other books by those same authors. And of the 6 shortlisted authors this year, 4 of them are non-debut authors, and so there are more things to read by them. And so I've looked into them here and found some bits to read. Jonathan Escoffery and Chetna Maru are both debut writers, so I haven't got any other books of theirs to be able to check out. But here's me reading some of the other ones. So let's get cracking, talking a little bit about those. So first up, we have Sarah Bernstein, and so she's shortlisted for Study for Obedience, and I went back and read her debut, which is The Coming Bad Days. And this, in many ways, is a very similar sort of style, albeit with a very different kind of narrative. So this book is written in that same very almost a sort of dreamlike style where it sort of shifts from phrase to phrase and between sentences and between ideas and thoughts, which is what I really enjoyed about Study for Obedience and really enjoyed here with The Coming Bad Days. So this book is a little bit more broken up in the sense that you've kind of got these short chapters, but essentially a large part of this book is really trying to grapple with some of those same kind of ideas. We have this sort of main character who sort of floats a bit through life as quite dramatic things happen to her and people around her. She's sort of recently left this relationship. She is kind of on her way out trying to sort things out, and she's sort of as a result isolated herself from many of the things going on around her, which is obviously something that's picked up a bit in Study for Obedience, where the main character is moving through the world in a way that's sort of detached from everybody else and kind of a little bit almost from reality at times as well. And so in this, I really enjoyed how she creates this really intense world where where this character can both have these sort of in-depth thoughts, but then at a moment's notice drop everything and move to another idea or move country or move town or whatever. And there's a kind of coldness to the book that I actually really enjoyed. I thought it was really cleverly handled, this sort of in-depth narrative of moving from place to place, moving kind of thought, moving quite rapidly between things. That feels almost this sort of detached sense of things. But actually I really enjoyed it in this book. There's something really captivating, I think, for me at least, about the way that she writes this very narratively focused thing about somebody who's almost unfocused, who kind of can shift and change and move and adapt. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. And so we begin with The Pools. So next up is Tinkers by Paul Harding, a book that he won the Pulitzer Prize for. And this is a book that largely focuses on the sort of last days of a man who ostensibly sort of works around clocks and kind of tuning and repairing and all of that kind of thing with clocks. Hence kind of the name Tinkers, the sort of idea of tinkering and what have you. But it kind of begins with this sort of narrative right from the beginning where we know that the main character is going to die. The character doesn't really know this at this point, but it's we're sort of told it by hours. So, you know, it sort of starts with like 150 hours or thereabouts. And sort of slowly we watch as that clock ticks down, and this kind of motif running through of both time escaping, but also, you know, he is someone who works with clocks, and there's a kind of cruel irony to all of it. But in the midst of that, he starts sort of cycling through bits of his family history and bits of his past, and we learn little things about these kind of family secrets or these sort of hidden away notions of things. And I found it really quite interesting in a way that I didn't always find with This Other Eden. And the sort of same lyrical style is there, but I think I kind of really enjoyed the plot aspect of this. There's a real urgency that comes from knowing that this clock is ticking down, and we are following this very much with the author as well. So I really enjoyed this, even more than the actual shortlisted one. I mean, who knows if this had been eligible for the Booker in 2011? He's a US author. US authors weren't eligible at the time for the Booker. Maybe this would have been something that got shortlisted as well. Next, we move to pool number 2, Paul Lynch, this time with Grace. So, just out of reach. So, Prophet Song is the book that he has been shortlisted for this year. And Grace is a book that is written in a very similarly intense style. So, we follow a set of characters, and particularly looking kind of almost at the outside from this to this character, Grace. And her trying to... her trying to kind of move through an incredibly tense and difficult set of scenarios. And this book has line breaks, which will be a relief to people who have read Prophet Song. But it still has that same suffocating atmosphere. The book really kind of locks you into some of these scenarios. It really watches as you, as the reader, sort of struggle in the discomfort. At times as well, it very slightly breaks a little bit. So at one point, I don't know if you can see, so there are these sort of couple of pages that are blank or sort of blacked out. And before it, a couple of pages that are just lots of segmented thoughts with dashes in between them. And that's only a few pages as opposed to all of Prophet Song. But that sort of, I think, shows, there's this really strong style here from Paul Lynch of trying to make form and function kind of marry together. So completely breaking language or breaking sentence structure or breaking kind of how the words work on the page to kind of convey a sort of disjointed set of thinking or a kind of panic rising in a character's chest. And so the text physically on the page does some of that work as well. And I think equally, sort of some of the things that people have sort of pointed out from Prophet Song appear here as well. There's almost kind of James Joycean thing of sort of creating brand new words and sort of just by sort of coupling together words that don't really make sense together. So, he'll talk about something being sort of... I actually can't now think of a good example after having said that, but like, for example, sour sweet, and obviously that's not the best example, but he will do sort of things like that where these kind of conflicting words will sort of combine with each other into one word, and he kind of has these compounds all the way through the text. So it's sort of a deeply intense and tricky book in many ways, but I really appreciated what he was doing here to really show the brokenness of the scenario around this character. It also makes me wonder if Paul Lynch is okay. Because sort of 2 for 2 of the books I've read of his have both been really intense books about people really struggling, where there's a sort of suffocation on the page, really. So there we go. But still an interesting book nonetheless. And finally, Paul Murray, this time with Skippy Dies. And I've not got a copy here with me, but Skippy Dies, I mentioned a sort of few weeks back on one of my weekly reads things. Also about 700 pages, like The Bee Sting. And also this sort of tragicomic depiction of a set of characters' lives and how they intertwine. So we're told right from the beginning, and by the title of the book, that Skippy, one of our main characters, is going to die. We're told some of the circumstances around his death right at the beginning, but the book really unfurls into everything else. And it's sort of a teenage drama in many ways. It's sort of lots of lots of sort of relationships between, like teenage relationships of somebody having a crush on someone and whatever. And Skippy is sort of part of this sort of nerds, essentially, with a group of other people, including this very odd close friend of his who sort of speaks like a sort of slightly Victorian gentleman. But ultimately, at the heart of this, these characters are trying to create something where they can reach out and speak to people, speak to the dead, or speak to various things, or kind of break some of the rules of nature or physics. And all of this is sort of this highfalutin stuff is happening while Skippy is just kind of trying to work out how to get a kiss from a girl he likes. But all of this is kind of unfurling where we suddenly realise that Skippy is having a much harder time than we expected in the book. And so actually this starts casting some sort of questions on the final, what again will happen towards the end of this book, sort of finding out a different reason for how Skippy might have died, trying to work out what has actually gone on here. And actually that's what I think is really interesting as a side-by-side with the bee sting, is the way that Paul Murray often introduces plot points seems to suggest that we know as a reader exactly what the cause of that is, or what the real truth of that thing was, only to sort of subvert it later in the book. And without spoiling anything for the bee sting, the titular bee sting is sort of subverted at one point in the book in a way that's really quite profound, because we suddenly realize that we've taken various characters' words as gospel, because they've been presented in a way that it sounds like it's coming from the author instead of from the characters. And in some ways Skippy plays around with some of these ideas as well. So really interesting to see them all side by side in that respect. And actually what's kind of great is this is sort of mirrored essentially my exact feelings about the shortlist, in that were I to pick a winner from these 4 books by the authors before, it would probably still be a Paul Murray, Sarah Bernstein sort of race to the finish. But I think in either way, it's been really interesting for me to go back and read some of these books by those authors, to kind of see what else exists in their world of writing, what else they do. So yeah, anyway, that's been me having a little gander through those. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have other recommendations for books by these authors, I'd love to hear them. But either way, take care and speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.